These are a bunch of Sesame Street ass motherfuckers around here. I mean,
He said
wait a minute.
he even said that he had taken pride in the fact that he could be at the tavern all night and still show up to court the next day and win all the cases just by the seat of his pants, that he didn't need to do any research.
Okay, I gotta bag up. I gotta bag up because girl, you're gonna give me heart troubles.
Okay.
So wait, the attorney went to jail.
Wait before the attorney go to jail, because it's just too many. It's just too many people that's going to jail. Wait a minute. Okay,
I can help him. I can do better than the fuck they did.
Okay.
Snow Files, Season 2, Episode 38, A String of Things, with Mimi.
The mission of the Snow Files podcast is to expose the misconduct of the state's attorney's office under Charles Renard. It is not our intention in any way to disparage the current state's attorney's office or the Bloomington Police Department.
Hey y'all, we have so much going on. It's been an incredible month, and we want to thank all of you for riding this roller coaster with us. We do have some updates. You may have seen the shares on social media for the special on Bart McNeil's case, which will premiere on September 25th at 7 p.m. Central on Oxygen Network. Recall, Bart was convicted for the murder of his 3-year-old daughter under Charles Renard State's Attorney's Office. You know, the same State's Attorney's Office that wrongfully convicted Jamie. Bart said from the beginning that he suspected his then-girlfriend, Masuk Nowlin, of murdering his daughter, but Bloomington police wouldn't listen. Imagine that. They arrested Bart the next day, and they convicted him in 1999, the same year Jamie and Susan were arrested. Nearly a decade later, Masuk was convicted of the murder of her mother-in-law, and she did it in a very diabolical way. She lured her mother-in-law to Joliet under the guise of hiring her as a Chinese interpreter. If you're in the Bloomington Normal area, you're in for an exciting special opportunity. On October 5th, there will be an exclusive viewing at 8 p.m. at the Normal Theater of the 2-hour Oxygen special, followed by a Q&A featuring a panel of experts from the episode, including local crime reporter Edith Brady-Lunny from WGLT, Scott Reeder, who covered the case on Suspect Convictions podcast, private investigator Kevin McLean, our good friend and Chicago's own private investigator Paul Cialino, and Bart's cousin, Chris Ross, who's led the charge advocating for Bart's innocence. And although our good friend Dr. Amanda Vickery can't make the panel, she's also featured on the Oxygen show. So for the latest updates, visit freebart.org. I'll be there, and I can't wait. Remember, any light that shines on Renard's corrupt reign as McLean County State's Attorney helps all of us. It helps all of our cases. We must stick together and support each other in this fight. And don't forget, we talked about it a little bit last week. Jamie and I will be guests on the Popo Report, hosted by Paul Cialino, P.I. Extraordinaire, and Lupe Wolf McGuire, Esquire, which should air around October 8th or 9th. We'll be sure to post the link when it airs. In the meantime, Don't forget to subscribe, download, and listen to the Po Report, the most fantastically raw review of criminal justice news in Chicago, Illinois, and around the country. And while you're at it, give it a 5-star rating. Last week, Leslie and I had the best time talking about Jamie's case with Mimi and Miss Adams on A String of Things with a Z podcast. And we thought those of you who are knee-deep in Jamie's case with us might enjoy a reaction from folks who haven't dug into the case as much as we have. What can we say? Mimi and Miss Adams are hilarious, but most importantly, they got it. They got it right off the bat. As you probably heard in the intro, sometimes it's good to take a step back and get a new perspective. Thanks so much, Mimi, for letting us share this wonderful interview. You can listen to A String of Things with a Z podcast at astringofthings.podbean.com.
Mimi would like to welcome and thank you all for joining her on this episode of A String of Things. On this show, we hold absolutely nothing back. So if you can't take the heat, well, you know the rest. The show is also not recommended for children, so definitely have your earbuds on or put the kids to bed. Now, grab a glass of wine, kick back, and enjoy.
Tonight is special guest night. We have Tam here from the Snow Files. She will be telling us a story about a guy named Jamie Snow, and he was wrongly convicted 21. I think he's been in prison for 21 years, and they have been working on this case for 11. He's claiming his innocence, and I believe they may have had a breakthrough. They did go to court on the 8th. Don't quote me on it. She will tell you. This is Tam. Go ahead, Tam, and tell us who you are, what you do, where you're from, all of that good stuff. All of that good stuff. And then, just kind of start from the beginning of, how it happened and where we're at now.
So first, Mimi, I wanted to thank you so much for having us. You are a soldier working during COVID, and I know this show means a lot to you, so hats off to you. But you make sure that you get your rest, you sleep in and get all that good water and stuff. I'm the co-host of Snow Files podcast. That is about the wrongful conviction of Jamie Snow and how they got away with it. The other co-hosts are Bruce Fisher. He's from an organization called Injustice Anywhere. He's been supporting Jamie's innocence for many years now. And Leslie Pires, who joined us when Jamie's case was featured on another podcast, Truth and Justice with Bob Ruff. And the other frequent co-host, especially now that we're covering forensics, is Ray Wilson. Ray is a former chief of police from the New Jersey area. And he became interested in Jamie's case through his wife, Pam, who was Jamie's juvenile advocate when he was a teenager. We'll get this out in front. Jamie is not a Boy Scout, or was not a Boy Scout. He had run-ins with the law before. Ray and I have filed at least 70 Freedom of Information Act requests over the past decade, which resulted in a FOIA lawsuit that the state actually settled. And the judge said they just didn't respond properly. But Ray knows those documents extensively, and he's just been a tremendous resource in deciphering and organizing the police reports. So the Snow Files podcast is a culmination of the work that's been done on this case for over a decade. We just decided, fuck it, we're going to put this stuff out because people just aren't listening, and he was not getting relief in court. So in season 1, we covered the trial extensively. And in season 2, we covered the forensics. And we have about 51 episodes online, and that includes bonus episodes. And you can listen at snowfiles.net, plug in that shit. In the last 5 or 6 episodes, we've deviated because Jamie had a huge hearing on September 8th, like you said. And I think we'll discuss more about that hearing in the second hour. Let me just give you a little overview of the case. It's a really, really thick case. So I'm going to try to make this really condensed. So in 1999, Jamie Snow and his co-defendant, Susan Claycomb, were arrested for the murder of a gas station attendant, Bill Little. That occurred on Easter Sunday in 1991 at the Clark Station in Bloomington, Illinois. And that's a rural town about 2 hours south of Chicago. Jamie's currently being represented by Lauren Myerscough-Muller and Carl Leonard from the Exoneration Project. So this was an unsolved cold case that was miraculously solved in 1999 when two new detectives took over the case because the seasoned detective that had been on the case since the beginning had not solved it. To give you an idea of the issues, it might be better just to give you an overview of the crime and the evidence used to convict Jamie. If you're familiar with the criminal justice system, I don't think that any of this is going to come as a surprise to you. On the evening of March 31st, 1991, that was Easter Sunday, at 8:18 p.m., a silent alarm was triggered at the Clark gas station. The first officer to respond was Jeff Pilo. He parked across the street from the station with his lights off and approached on foot, thinking maybe the suspect might still be in the station. Of course, they also had a lot of false alarms, so they weren't sure if this was a false alarm or if this was a real robbery. So as he stood across the street, he saw a male who we later know as Danny Martinez putting air in his tires. He was also watching the front of the station, and he saw no movement inside the store. As he was watching the store, he had full view of the entire store and Martinez airing his tires. And these little Clark oil stations were, and I'm sure y'all are way too young to remember this, but I called them little crackerjack stations because they were just these little boxy, tiny stations. So if you stood across the street, you had full view of everything that was going on. Pilo said that Martinez walked towards the store, stopped and looked back towards his car, turned and walked towards the store again, turned back around and walked to his car, and then got in and drove off the lot, which was weird. It was like he was doing this little back and forthy thing. Really strange. So while that was going on, he had called in the license plate of Martinez's car, but dispatch told him that the leads were down, and Pilo asked the dispatch to hold the plate because the guy was driving off the lot. And if this was a real robbery, he'd need that plate. Now, why he ever let Martinez drive off that lot is beyond me, because Martinez was the only person on the scene when police arrived. After Martinez drove away, Pilo started walking across the street. So as he was doing this, a pickup truck with two white males pulled up and started to get out of their truck. Pilo told them to get back in their truck across the street. He said they were being a little argumentative. And that's when Pilo noticed a shoe sticking out from behind the counter. Then he ordered the two to get off the lot and wait across the street. And then he drew his weapon. That's when he cleared the store and found the attendant lying lifeless on the floor. Now, there was another police officer at the scene at the same time. He arrived about the same time, maybe a little bit later than Pilo, and that was Officer Williams. And he arrived at the scene, and he was like at an intersection. And that would be like if Pilo was across the street, the intersection was on the left. So he was like at a stop sign, and he was watching the front of the door and the whole store the whole time. He had heard Pilo call in the license plate over the radio, and he also didn't observe any movement inside the store. There was only one door in, one way out. Neither officer saw anyone enter or leave the station, and they both explicitly stated that they saw no movement inside the station. So police identified 3 eyewitnesses in the case. Of course, there were no eyewitnesses to the crime that we know of, so we kind of use that term loosely. One was Gerardo Gutierrez. He reported that he was at the store around 8 p.m. and he pulled into the station for gas. He was pumping gas, and that he saw a man inside the station arguing with the attendant. When he entered the station to pay for his gas, he said that he handed the attendant money, and he reported the attendant's hands were shaking so badly that he dropped the money. And he said there was a man standing next to him and that he lit a cigarette. And then after he went home, he heard about the shooting. He said either on the radio or the TV, and then he returned to tell police what he saw just a few minutes earlier. So that night, police put together a composite drawing based on Gutierrez's description, and it was released the next day. So he described a man with an earring and a fresh injury on his chin, so fresh that he could see holes in his skin from the stitches. In the early morning of the crime, he identified a mugshot from photo books as the suspect, and he also called the police a few days later and claimed he saw the man again in Peoria, Illinois. But Gutierrez never picked out Jamie, not in a lineup or photo sessions over the years, and ones that even included multiple photos of Jamie, which is a whole other thing. The other eyewitnesses, they said, were Carlos and Juan Luna. They were young teenagers who lived across the street, a few houses down from the Clark station. They claimed that they were looking out the window to see if their aunt was working, because she worked at the Clark station. They were going to go see if they could get some free candy. They claimed they saw a man come out of the station, facing forward, opening the door with his left hand. Carlos said the man had on a black coat down to his ankles, and the coat was unbuttoned. He stated the man looked like he was hiding something under his coat, but he could not see what it was. It was later determined that these boys were like over 200 feet from the station. Carlos gave a statement saying that he didn't think he was able to identify anyone later. And Juan said he thought that maybe he could, but neither boy was able to complete a composite drawing. That night, the police composite artist said that they just couldn't give enough details of the man's face. He was asked later during the trial if he knew Danny Martinez, and he answered yes, but he also testified that he did not see Martinez at the scene. So from where Martinez was located, Juan and Carlos would have had to look through Martinez to see the suspect come out of the door if that all happened at the same time.
I have a quick
That's okay.
question. How long from the silent alarm to how long did they say that the body had been there? Were they able to determine that? Because it seems though the guy that they let go, they should be trying to find that person.
Yeah, they did find him. But no, they never looked at him as a suspect. They always looked at him as a witness. So the silent alarm, I believe, went off at 8:18, and police were there a couple of minutes later.
So this was a few minutes after the guy left. The one that said he was standing there shaking, and he had an altercation with someone in there. It's something weird here. So the guy that it's really something weird. The guy that picked someone out of the lineup happens to be there during the time that he was having an altercation, which was around 8 something, correct?
Gutierrez did not pick Jamie out of the lineup. Ever.
Right, but he did, he gave a description though, right?
Right. Oh, in the photo lineup. Okay. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, so, he did pick a guy out of the photo lineup. And then he said he later saw him in Peoria and called the cops, and that just never went anywhere. They were like, they didn't see him. How reliable is he? We can't find him.
I bet. Because that seems really weird that he just so happened to be there and so happened to see this. Because if you see that this man is really nervous and he's dropping his money, why didn't you go out and call the police and say, hey, I think something's going on here? And then a few minutes later, the silent alarm goes off and this man is in there laying down dead. It almost seems staged.
So do you think if Gutierrez did it, that he would have come back to the station to try to cover his tracks?
You know, I've learned in my time, People are weird. He might have just came back just to see how much people knew, or if they had any evidence, or if
Yeah.
he dropped anything, or he could have been nervous. Maybe he left a fingerprint or something to that effect, because it really seems weird that you turn around and see the same guy again in Peoria. So you're in Bloomington first, then you see the same guy in Peoria. It's almost like he's trying to get the limelight off him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It
Point the
just
finger at somebody and
somebody
give
else
this
put them
weird,
on a different trail.
crazy description.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and you got an earring in your nose, and see, a normal individual say, okay, I may have came to the gas station before, this area before, whatever the case may be. And this man seems a little nervous. He dropping money, and I'm sure he was looking nervous. So you mean to tell me you just walked out the store like nothing's going on and didn't call the police or didn't alert anyone or stick around just to see if anything happened? You just took off and then you came back to the store to see what had happened. No, it seems like you came back because you wanted to make sure that you didn't leave any evidence, or you wanted to see how much they knew, or if anybody seen anything. That's just my opinion. It just sounds so weird to me. But people are weird like that.
Well,
I'm telling you, some serial killers will go kill somebody and then go stand over the body and be like, "Oh my God, what happened?"
what happened? Yeah. I would not be surprised if the person came back. Eventually a crowd gathered. And I would not be surprised if the person that did it was in that crowd at
Mm-hmm.
all.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing that, I didn't get deep into these, but Gutierrez also said, he lived in the neighborhood, right? So he was saying, I frequented this store.
Wow.
And the kid, he was 18. So he's like, the kid was always friendly. And he just thought it was so suspicious because the kid he wasn't talkative. He wasn't saying anything, and that he was nervous and he dropped his change. And I don't know. I do wonder about those first people that were on the scene, except for the kids that were across the street. And I just don't think they could have made an ID from that. I've stood there at their window and looked across the street. I actually have a picture of that distance, and you just can't tell. You just can't tell, who that, from that distance, if somebody's walking out and all of that.
And I looked at the case and stuff, and they said that the person that did do this shooting, he only walked away with $60.
Yeah. So the $60 was in the papers. We actually know that the total was like $93 and something, but that's still not, and this just also makes us wonder if it was not a real robbery, if it was just some other issue, like a retaliation or something that the attendant was into, or, say they got in a fight and he landed up shot. I mean, there's so many possibilities, but I like that you latched onto it being staged, because one other thing I don't think I said in my introduction was the cash drawer was missing. The entire insert was missing. So when we get into, looked like he had something under his coat, that's kind of, I'm sure the police were running around that night asking people, did it look like they had something under their coat? Because they eventually say, what he eventually testifies to was he had a cash drawer under his coat. Like, how you could ever fucking tell something's a cash drawer,
Right.
So, like, why would
Right.
you even think of
Right.
a cash drawer?
Mhm.
Maybe a bottle of pop if they were trying to steal it or something, but,
Did Jamie do a polygraph? Because I think I seen somewhere where it said that he did a polygraph and he's passed it, but the prosecutors are still doing everything in their power to keep him in there for life.
Yeah, they did do a polygraph and he did pass it. Then we have jailhouse informants that did not pass theirs, which we found out through FOIAs, that they actually didn't pass them, and they put them on the stand anyways, and they can always say they use polygraphs when it's convenient for them.
Right.
Had he failed a polygraph, that would be all over the news. But they're not saying he passed it. And they're not saying that the jailhouse informants that they put on the stand failed theirs. They're not going to say that.
The picture. How did James?
Well, like I said, he was a usual suspect. You know, he was in trouble. There were a ton of robberies going on at that time. Mm-hmm. People he was involved with were committing them. Right. And he was just thrown into the basket of, poor white trash, trailer park trash that's always getting in trouble. And, that's it.
Just to find somebody to close the case. And usually that's usually what happens. Yeah. What about his parents?
Well, they're both deceased.
Oh.
And his mother died when he was 17, and she had been sick with cancer for many years. His father died. He was a little bit older, maybe in his early 20s. His father passed away from a heart attack, but they were there for him. His stepfather, was there for him during the trial and supported him, as did his family and stepsisters. So, he had that kind of support. But once he went away, it was just kind of gone.
They gave up.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I just thought that it seemed so funny about that guy. Yeah, it just seemed funny how he entered, and then how the police that came on the scene let the car drive away. You got a dead body in there, but you're gonna let someone leave the scene. I don't understand that either. But a lot of things.
And the trucks.
Trucks.
I mean, just let them go.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll have to remember to tell you. I'll have to remember to tell you something about Pilo later. So I think neither boy was able to complete a composite sketch. There was a lineup about 3 months later where they attended it, and Carlos, he was 14 at the time. He identified Jamie, but he said, I closed my eyes and just imagined which one of them might have did it, and he came to mind. So that's not a good idea.
Are you serious?
Did they use that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they had Carlos on the stand. Now, Juan Luna didn't. He was younger, and I believe they were actually uncle and nephew, if I'm remembering right. But at close ages, 12 and 14. So, So I think the cop that was working this case at that time was like, that's not a good idea. Through FOIA, we actually got a memo where the guy said, I stood across the street that crime night. I talked to those boys, and I could not look out that window and recognize people that I knew that were working that crime scene. There was no way that they ID'd anyone, period. And Carlos has since recanted his ID, by the way. So then we have Danny Martinez. So he turned into the star witness of the case. He was the one that was airing up his tires. He was the one that was on the scene. He stated that he pulled into the parking lot to get some soda pop and air to air up his tire because it was low. And he said that while he was down putting air in his tire, he heard two sounds, and he thought his car was backfiring. He said he saw a man backing out of the station with a tan windbreaker type jacket. And he said it was short, that it came to his waist, which is a lot different than, what they said about a long trench coat type thing.
Carrying a cash drawer.
And he said that it was, his coat was zipped all the way up, and the guy had his hands in his pocket. So in the first report, Martinez stated that as the man was backing out of the station, he got up from his position and started toward the station. He said it sounded like his car was about to die. So he stopped to turn and looked at the car, decided it would be okay. And when he turned back around, he saw the man out of the corner of his eye, rounding the corner on the east side, heading north. So although Martinez did assist in the development of a composite, It was starkly different from the one developed by Gutierrez. I think police believed Gutierrez because that's the one that they released to the public. On the night of the crime, Martinez also picked out 2 photos from the photo arrays and stated that it's between these 2. One of the photos was also the same one that Gutierrez had picked out, and it's not known how those suspects were cleared. We just don't have any police reports saying how they were cleared, even though the 2 witnesses that they used at trial are saying that was the person. They picked out a freaking picture separately and said that that was the person that they saw.
I'm going to cut in here, Sam. I believe your co-host did tune in, Leslie.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. How are you, Leslie?
Good, I'm good. I'm here now.
Wonderful. So at any part, you can step in. I know you kind of getting the backlog of what she's saying and, where she's at. So at any time, you can go ahead and chime in. And anyone else that's in the comments, if you have anything that you want to add or share any questions, concerns, definitely feel free to call in and ask questions. Just make sure your mic is muted until you're able to speak, just so that it won't echo. You can go ahead and go.
Well, I just kind of wanted to walk through the lineups and the photo arrays that they had just chronologically. In June of 91, that's when an in-person lineup was conducted. And Jamie was number 6. Martinez asked number 3 and 4 to move forward and said that number 3 looked like the person, but he was not positive. And like I said before, at that time, Carlos Luna was the only witness to pick out Jamie Snow in the lineup, but he also failed to identify him from subsequent photo books. And like I said in his testimony, he said, I just imagined every one of them doing it, and he came to mind and he fit the picture. And he has since recanted his identification in an affidavit. He said, as a 14-year-old boy, I thought the police had caught the right person. Because of this, I identified Jamie Snow. There were 6 people in the lineup. Where would he have gotten the idea that Jamie Snow was the right person? Unless it had been suggested to him. So in October of 1991, there was another photo array session conducted with Danny Martinez. He did not pick out Jamie, who was in those, but he picked out another photo, different from all of the ones that he picked out before. You'll see why this is important in a bit. So in November of 1993, there were multiple pictures of Jamie. The police gave multiple pictures of Jamie in a photo session, and Martinez did not pick out anyone. During this time, the victim's family is just putting tremendous pressure on the police department to solve this crime. I mean, they should have. They wanted justice for their son. They used the media to keep pressure on the police department. They distributed thousands of flyers. They had a $2,500 Crime Stopper reward. And then an anonymous donor, which we later found out was Mitsubishi, donated $5,000. And this fund was separate, and to qualify, they asked for tips to be sent to a P.O. box. In December of 93, a completely different sketch was released to the public. So the first sketch showed a white man with a ball earring in his left ear, a mustache, chin scar, all of that stuff that Gutierrez said. He was described as being 22 to 25 years old, 6'2". Then they also released the composite that Danny Martinez had put together, which they did not look the same at all. And at first they said this was probably an accomplice, somebody that was with him, which doesn't fit, what they said at all. And then soon after, I think there was one sketch of the 2 people and said this guy might be an accomplice. And then after that, they started solely using Danny Martinez's sketch whenever they put it in the paper. And even a police spokesman came out and said the FBI teaches police to stick to one composite drawing during a homicide investigation. And Bloomington police followed that guideline until yesterday. And he said releasing the second composite drawing was like putting the second string offense into a game when the first string doesn't get the job done. Investigators believe the two witnesses who helped Sanders make the drawings saw the same person, but Ogg said it's possible the witnesses were describing two different people and the witnesses were not with each other near the station. So they just moved forward with the second composite created by Danny Martinez. And of course, Jamie does not have a chin scar. He did not have a thin face, and he never had an earring. So that was kind of perfect for the police. The victim's family continued to put tremendous pressure on the state. And in 1994, Jamie agreed to take a polygraph on the Clark murder as part of a plea deal in an unrelated case. And that's when he passed the polygraph. So at that time, Charlie Crow was the lead detective. He was the one that had been investigating the case the whole time. And he told Jamie after he took that polygraph that he believed he didn't commit the crime, but that he thought he knew who did. And Jamie told him that he had no idea who did it, and he would definitely tell him who did it. And then the case just remained cold. And in the last part of 97, Detective Crow retired. And that's when Detective Barkus and Detective Katz were assigned full time to the case. And then suddenly jailhouse informants started appearing, saying that Jamie had confessed to them. While he was doing a 1.5-year stint for obstruction of justice, he told everybody in the IDOC that he committed murder. He's doing a 1.5 years, and he's going to tell everybody, knowing that there's a reward out, that it's unsolved, and that it's a big deal in Bloomington, and that he was a suspect, right? But interesting, these informants, they all gave different stories of his alleged confession. For example, one said that Jamie and a friend were at a party down the street and walked up to the station to get cigarettes. Then Jamie got pissed off because the attendant didn't give him cigarettes for free, and that they left. And then they came back later because he was going to get his free cigarettes, and then he was refused again, and he shot the attendant when he was trying to steal them because Jamie thought that the Bill Little, the victim, could identify him. Note that Gutierrez stated the man next to him lit a cigarette. So why would he be trying to steal cigarettes?
I was just going to say that. I was just going to say that.
Were you?
Yes, I was. I was just going to say that.
So another story was that there were 3 of them, and they pulled up to get gas. And then Jamie decided that he didn't need to pay for the gas, so he went into the store and shot the attendant. If he was going to steal gas, why wouldn't he just drive off without paying? Like, anybody else does that wants to steal gas.
That was
back in the day.
Just going to go in there and shoot the attendant just for some gas. That's crazy.
And that was real popular back in the 90s. Just pull up, pump your gas, and pull off. That was very popular back in the 90s. Yeah, you didn't have to even go see the attendant. That's why they changed the pumps now, where you have to, sometimes it tells you have to come inside to pay now, because a lot of people was getting gas and riding off,
right?
And not paying.
Exactly. So Jamie and Susan Claycomb.
Well, Tim, before we go on to that, why don't we talk about these people and how they said they got Jamie to confess to him? Like, one guy supposedly all of a sudden for the first time ever is allowed to go mop the floor in front of Jamie's cell and says Jamie confessed to him through his cell bars randomly. Another guy says that he was working with Jamie and it was raining, so they got out of work early. So Jamie drove him to the beach to drink beers in the rain and confessed in his car.
Because everybody goes to the beach when it rains.
And I'm telling you, these are people who actually went to court and said these stories. These aren't just people who, wrote statements and, got leads for the police. This is what was said in court. There were people who said they were at a party with Jamie and they accused him of it and he looked down at the floor. So therefore, because he didn't deny it, he was guilty. And that's actually a thing in Illinois. If you don't deny it, that's a confession.
Yep.
So what else was there, Tam?
Was there an award? There was an award, right? That's probably what they were after.
Exactly. There's a reward, a Crime Stoppers, and we don't know who got that money. Somebody got that.
Oh, so somebody got the money.
Somebody got the money, and all these people were given other things and for their confessions. Every single one of them was either let off on charges. Some DCF was involved in some of the women that testified against him. Their people got let out of prison, time off their sentences. They got out of solitary confinement because of it, things like that.
We've been trying to find out about the reward money that we mentioned. So there was at least $7,500 that we know of. And everybody that testified said they didn't get paid and that they didn't get a deal. Now we know differently because we filed all these FOIAs and we found the evidence of deals. We can't find the evidence of the payment. And we've gone every route that we can think of. There's no trail. They're just like, oh, well, we don't know what happened to the reward money.
Wouldn't Mitsubishi be able to disclose that information, or is there a privacy thing attached to it?
They said that they sent it to Crime Stoppers, and that was it.
Oh.
They just said they sent it to Crime Stoppers, and it was up to them.
It seemed like Jamie may have, during the course of him growing up, how long did he live in Bloomington? I think maybe he made some enemies in the police department or something, because it seemed like they were coercing a lot of these people into saying that this young man did this. So what reason, my thing is, what reason to pick him out of, because obviously if you're in a lineup, some of you in a lineup, you have to have a rap sheet or you've been in jail before.
That's what she was saying in the beginning. She said that he was no saint. He did have a rap sheet. He have been having troubles and problems with the police before. So
I'm sure 50% of the young guys in Bloomington probably been in and out of jail during the 90s back then.
Every person that you find I guarantee you almost every person that you find on the exoneration database or that are being represented by Innocence Projects have a record. Some of them have been in gangs. Our friend Patrick Pursley was in a gang and they framed him and he just recently got exonerated. I mean, you're an easy target. You're an easy target for the police. And if you're a usual suspect, it's even worse. It's easy for them to pin stuff on people that have been in trouble.
Okay, so let's talk about his actual rap sheet, though. I mean, it was when he was a teenager, it was truancy, it was beer, it was running from the cops, it was smoking pot. As a young adult, he was accused of a robbery with his friends. So there was no violent crime. There was no drug dealing. There was no murder or anything like that. It's all of a sudden skyrockets from these crimes of a young man. And I know sometimes we could sound terrible saying that, oh, that's not really anything bad to be accused of, is like a robbery. But I mean, it's not, those are, misdemeanors, or I don't know what the robbery would have been.
He had burglary charges. He doesn't say that he didn't do that. I mean, he went to prison for burglaring, but that is not robbery, and that is not
right. So what did he do, Tammy? He went into somebody's house and stole something when nobody was home, and it was some, So I hate to downplay crime and everything like that, but when we talk about being a usual suspect, it seems like it goes from 0 to 100 real quick with what these other charges were from a gas station murder of a boy. And that's why they have to come up with these stories on how he got in a fight and it escalated quickly and it went badly, because it doesn't make sense. Join us on our journey to free Jamie Snow by becoming a member of the Snow Files Patreon team for a flat rate of $5 a month, or set your own monthly rate. All supporters will receive a Snow Files wristband and a shout out by Jamie on the Snow Files podcast. Just visit snowfiles.net and click on the Join Our Patreon button.
I kind of want to backtrack and kind of get a little bit more information. So he did have misdemeanors, but he did have a burglary on his background. And how much time did he serve for that burglary?
I think it was 3 years.
3 years,
early 80s, like 82.
Or so I was early 80s.
Now, was there a gun involved?
No.
Okay, so they didn't uncover a gun. Okay, and when did he go to prison for this particular crime that he's fighting now?
1999. He was arrested in 99.
Okay, how old was he?
34.
Okay, the rest of the things that he did before, that was when he was a teenager.
And early 20s.
Yeah, still young adult. And burglary is so much smaller than murder. That's way smaller.
Yeah. Or armed robbery, because that's a confrontational. I mean, he might have been sneaky, like I'm going to be sneaky and be a burglar and go into somebody's house when they're not home, but not I'm going to take a gun and wave it in somebody's face and, shoot them for $93.
What physical evidence are they saying that they had on him?
None.
Wow.
So how
they have physical evidence. They have physical evidence that does not match him. They have shoe prints that don't match him. They have fingerprints that don't match him.
So how
they have DNA that doesn't match.
Wait, excuse my French.
So we had
was he locked up?
It was 12.
Yeah, exactly.
It was 12 jailhouse snitches, and then a bunch of other witnesses. Some of them, women. There was, for instance, I can give you a quick story. One woman who says she was at a bar while his wife was there, and she overheard his wife telling a friend of theirs that she knows that her husband did it. And that's not true. That never happened. To this day, the woman says that it never happened. But yet she went to the trial and told that to the jury. But at the time, this woman was very young when she told that to the jury. Maybe, I don't know, what was she, Tim, 21 years old? And they were in a lot of trouble of their own, these women with their own charges, losing their children, these people who were just all, a group of friends. And to this day, she says it doesn't happen, but yet she won't write a statement. It's not that she's unwilling to write a statement. It's just she, to this day, is like, well, I don't know what I have to do with this case. I didn't really even say that much, and it's not my problem. But that's really the reason why he went away, is because about, 20 of these people who all had just a little bit to say.
When did these confessions come about? Did he have any, because I know that prior to him going to prison, they had people that said that he was in it, they did the whole lineup thing, and those wasn't even accurate. So to keep him in there, what was it that kept him in prison? Because I feel like if you don't have anything and they're questioning you and they don't have any physical evidence or anything, he should have been let out right then and there. And, when they were questioning him.
No, it was, we didn't get through like Danny Martinez eventually, after him and his co-defendant, Susan Claycomb, which we were just getting into, they were indicted and arrested in 99. And then after their arrest, Martinez had a private meeting with the state's attorney's office, and he ID'd Jamie from the picture in the paper from his arrest. Right. And a picture of the original lineup that he attended. And he said, that's him. So he became the star witness in the case. And his story changed from, remember in the beginning, we said that he saw somebody out of the corner of his eye rounding the building, to he was face to face with him within 3 feet. And, by the time he testified, his eyes, I'll never forget those eyes. And that's what I identified in that private meeting at the state's attorney's office, where nobody representing Jamie was, involved. And he became a star witness, and he said for sure that was him.
Tim, did you talk about yet how we spoke to the police officer who witnessed this entire interaction in 2020? So in 1991, Jeff Pilo, the first officer on the scene, is standing there across the street watching Danny Martinez at the gas station doing everything that he says he was doing while supposedly the suspect came out. And the statement in 1991 from this officer was there was nobody fled that building. Danny Martinez did not see anybody. There was no conversation with anybody, and he had an unobstructed view of the door. Now, as time goes on and Jamie goes through trial, the state tries to allude that maybe, there were trucks going by in his way, or he was on his radioing and arguing to the 911 dispatcher, so he was distracted, and Jamie fled the scene while he was looking down at his radio. We talked to Jeff Pilo in 2020, and he still says to this day, I had an unobstructed view of the door. Danny Martinez is lying. There was nobody else in that gas station parking lot except Danny Martinez. If I had seen a suspect flee the scene, of course I would have chased him. Like, what are you talking about? So this man's story has never changed. And even before 2020, he did write some other statements, and going through them all, they've never changed over the years. They've always been consistent.
So remember, I was telling you earlier that Jeff Pilo was standing across the street and he was watching Martinez go back and forth and go back and forth. He said that in a statement in 1999. When he got on the stand, he was like, I can't. And this was just a few months after he made those statements. And we have the recording and, his actual transcribed statement from the police report on our website. But what he said, he said all of that. And then when he got on the stand to testify in Jamie's trial, he was hedging on it. But he came up later and gave an affidavit and said Tina Griffin was the state's attorney. She said, just answer what I ask you. So he was like,
don't elaborate, don't editorialize.
Yeah. So I didn't tell him about Jeff Pilo. Jeff Pilo has an interesting history after the trial. He was arrested and convicted for stalking and raping women. He would stop a woman and then look them up, like their address and their, whatever. And then he would go back and rape them. And it was really diabolical. It was like hours long. Then he would make them bathe. Like bathe, no DNA, nothing left, like that. So he was arrested later. Now, when he testified for Jamie, he had just gotten Officer of the Year in Bloomington Police Department. So it's a crazy case.
Who was the prosecuting attorney on this case?
The person over the state's attorney's office was Charles Renard. He is now a retired judge. He became, he became a judge after this case. And he actually has about 5 that we know of, 2 people that have been exonerated because that office withheld evidence, and 3 that are sitting in prison right now, including Jamie.
All in the 90s, all around the same.
All in that same. And this is not Chicago. This is Bloomington, Illinois. So there wasn't a lot of murders happening. So how are all these guys ending up with?
Live in Bloomington a couple of years ago, and it's really a small town. So it is a college there. It's a college town. So you got a lot of young folks there, but it's pretty much like the town that I live in now. You can get around it in about 10 to 15 minutes. Their system is kind of jacked up and they don't have a lot going on out there. So they try to get you for everything. So I'm very familiar with Bloomington and Peoria and stuff like that.
Leslie, what part do you play in this, sweetie? I'm sorry.
I met Jamie through the original podcast he was doing with Truth and Justice. That was I think you guys started it in 2018 and ended it in 2019. And I met him just as a listener, and we just became friends with him. And when that podcast ended, we all felt like the story didn't end there, that the podcast left a lot out and it wasn't done. And this story is so exhausting, as you can tell, it never ends. Tammy's been talking to you for 1 hour and 25 minutes. We could probably talk to you for like another 5 hours. So we decided we wanted to make our own platform, but we didn't know what to do. So the 4 of us got together and, we just did it. And I've only known Jamie for 3 years now, not even, going on 3 years. And we've all just become very close and
How old
doing
is he
it
now?
together. 55.
Oh, Jamie.
Wow.
You know what? I see. I didn't get pissed off now. So my question is: did anyone? What is the word I'm looking for? Did anyone challenge the credibility of those bastards in prison? Because you're in prison. So how is your mouth a prayer book at this time?
His lawyer tried to. I mean, and the judge, it seemed like the judge was in on it with the state because he would say that he wasn't allowed to bring up certain things about these people. So the most horrific of crimes of like child molestation accusations were left out. We literally, there was a fucking, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed, no, don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but there was literally a priest who showed up to say that he was like a priest and a pastor and all this, and he knew Jamie did it and blah, 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 blah. Come to turn out, he fled town because he was a child molester. That wasn't allowed in his own family, his nieces and nephews. So there was a DCF case going on and all of that. And this was already on the record that these accusations were flying around. And that's why he left town. But when he got on the stand, he didn't have to give an answer for why he left town. And when his lawyer, the defense attorney, asked him why he left town, the state objected and the judge overruled it, and he got away with not answering the question. He couldn't even say the name of the parish that he was a preacher at. He was not a preacher. He was a preacher on paper where he just took a little class and got a certificate. That's just a quick example of how it was almost impossible to confront these people. The lawyer did confront them. He didn't do the best homework that he could. I mean, anybody now in today's day and age in 2020 would just hear the simple questions the lawyer was able to get in and would use our own minds and judgment to find them uncredible. But back in the 90s, I think people just had a different perception and a different way of thinking.
Yeah, and the
So
system
now,
wasn't as advanced as it is now because you can go on there and Google people now. I mean, it's
yeah,
so
and
easy.
we didn't talk about Susan Claycomb, which was his
That's who
co-defendant.
I was about to ask
She,
about. Where does she play?
yeah, so she was Jamie's sister-in-law, and there was no reason for her to even be like, they weren't close. In fact, they bickered, right? She was best friends with his ex-wife. They would hang out and, they would get all, whatever. Susan was like aggressive and just kind of mouthy, and she just spoke her mind. So they bickered a lot, but that was his sister-in-law, so whatever, and that was the best friend. So they were trying to pull her into it. What they didn't know is that they didn't get along at all. So there wasn't any, they certainly wouldn't have tried to pull off a crime together. So, that
But
was
Tam, didn't they need a
interesting.
driver because Jamie didn't have a car? That was the whole point of getting her
Yeah, I
involved.
mean,
They needed a driver.
they said she was, but I think more than they needed a driver, because in Jamie's trial they didn't even talk about a car. But I think more than needing a driver, she was pregnant when she was arrested, and she was living in Tennessee, living her best life. Her husband had a plumbing business. They were doing good. They had their kids. She was pregnant with their third child. I believe it was their third child. And they came and got her and they arrested her and just upended their whole lives. And she got an attorney. And I think that what they got her for was to flip, because they tried the entire time to get her to say, okay, well, we'll give you parole if you just say that you were driving the car. But they actually eventually charged her, because, when they try to offer you a deal and you don't take it, that pisses them off. So they charged her with murder, the same thing that Jamie had. And she went to trial with her attorney, Steve Skelton, and he was a private attorney, and he did take people apart. He took Danny Martinez apart. He took the Lunas apart. He took every single person apart that got on that stand, and he did a stellar job.
Ugh.
And Jamie's attorneys were paid thousands of dollars to sit in on that trial, and they failed. They failed. They failed him in every possible way. And Jamie's attorney, after trial, like in 2005, went to prison himself. So the
Okay,
first
you know
cop
what? I'm
that's
having
on the
heart troubles
scene.
now. Oh my God.
Crazy.
Wait, I'm okay. Wait a minute.
I gotta back
Oh,
up because I got a lot of questions. I
wait a
have a
minute.
lot of questions too.
Before you say that, wait, whoa. Maybe that's why the hell was not unable to, because I can't, I'm no attorney at all, but there's no way I wouldn't have been able to back down from a testimony from a son of a bitch in jail. Your mouth not a prayer book. As a matter of fact, sir, why are you here? Were you coerced to say that Jamie did this? Were you paid to say this? Were you offered a reduced sentence? Hey, I would have investigated each and every last one of them sons of bitches if I had to go and find their first name and last name and find some of their friends, because there's no way those testimonies should have been able to be used. No way in hell.
He flew by the seat of his pants and just went off the notes that he had, and that was it. He did no
Was he
He didn't interview. He didn't interview one witness. One witness he did not interview. Not
was he
one.
a public pretender?
No, he was. First they had the public defender who was over. Her name was Amy Davis, and she was like you, right? She was like, "This is bullshit." I don't even know how you got indicted, and where did all these people come from popping up, in 1998 and saying that you confessed to them. And then she went to court, started filing motions like crazy, discovery, and she told the judge,
That's
I'm going
right,
to interview
damn it.
everyone. She said, I'm going to interview every one of these people, and I need funding to do that, and this is what I'm going to do. And you know what? They got her recused because she had defended one of the jailhouse informants 10 years ago in an unrelated crime, and they got her recused. And since she was over the public defender's office, and I promise you, I've read the transcript, she fought to stay on Jamie's case. And since she was the head of the office, they recused the entire PD. So they went and got a stroke victim who was Patrick Riley. He had a stroke. And then they got Frank Pitzel, who we would find out because he got arrested later and went to prison also, was a gambling addict, was an alcoholic, had mental illness issues, and talked about in his sentencing hearings and mitigation how it was just too much pressure. He was getting divorced from his wife, and he was doing a murder case back in that time. And Jamie was like, what the fuck? He went to prison. He was a power of attorney over an elderly person who was living in a nursing home. And he bilked her for like $250,000, which was her life savings that he spent on gambling and
she had
alcohol
to
and
go
whatever his
into
pleasures were.
she had to go into a nursing home because of him. That was her money to survive on for the rest of her life, and she had to go into like public housing after that.
These are a bunch of Sesame Street ass motherfuckers around here.
He said,
wait a minute.
He even said that he had taken pride in the fact that he could be at the tavern all night and still show up to court the next day and win all the cases just by the seat of his pants, that he didn't need to do any research.
Okay, I gotta back up. I gotta back up because
girl, you're gonna give me heart troubles.
Okay.
So wait, the attorney went to jail.
Wait before the attorney go to jail, because it's just too many. It's just too many people that's going to jail. Wait a minute. Okay,
I can help him. I can do better than the fuck they did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So where did she come into play? Why did they even contact his co-defendant? Well, I mean, where did it come in? I mean, did they did he make a phone call to her, or what happened to make them get her and not his ex-wife? I mean, what correlation do they have?
Yeah. there's no indication that I've seen why they arrested Susan. How she got indicted was, she got indicted just like, you can indict anybody.
It was Tammy, his wife, who I think they were after, but she was very strong. And she was just, no, the F, you aren't going to do this to me. And you're not going to do this to my husband. It's not true. It's not true. It's not true. And she just wouldn't cave. And they were after Susan and hounding her the exact same way. And in the end, Susan didn't cave either, but she came off like maybe she might flip.
Vulnerable. Oh.
So
Okay.
shit, maybe we need to look in the background of the judge. That maybe the judge got some shit she had, because it seems like I can't understand how they can. I see you all. I'm keep going back to these witnesses, these people that's saying that were locked up, that's saying he confessed to them. Each one of them had a different story, mind you. One of them he took to the beach when it was raining. One of them the guy was mopping outside of his cell, and he said, hey man, how is it that the judge let that walk? Something had to be wrong with the judge.
I know he didn't encounter. And then did they ask at least, because I would have been asking all type of questions, where are these people stationed in the prison? Because they have different cell blocks.
Bingo.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So where was these people stationed in
they
this
weren't
jail?
even near him. I think, Tim, we found out there was no way for that guy to be physically mopping the floor outside of there.
Wow.
Yeah, because, and there's an interesting thing there, because Jamie was going on a court writ. They get you closer to where your court is going to be. They'll put you somewhere overnight. And it's really interesting because when we did see those movement records, this particular person, his name is Bruce Rowland, was assigned to be a worker. He was assigned one day, and the next day, Jamie was assigned to go stay overnight there at the court writ. So he wasn't there very long. It was a very limited time that he was there. And then they don't put you in general population, right? You're in like a segregated place. So he's in a room. First of all, the workers can't talk to inmates ever. There's always a CO right there. So he's behind a steel door. They would have had to yell at each other. So Jamie would have had to been yelling, saying, I did it. Yeah, I'm here because, I'm on what they said was he was on the gang circuit. Jamie said he was on the gang circuit because of the Bill Little homicide. It's like, what? He was there on a court writ. That's documented, but they let that go in court. And I think that goes to the judge because, the judge was the one that did some of the deals, some of the plea deals that these people had. He was over them.
Exactly.
The judge is the one that signed off on them to do wiretaps on some of the people that we found out later through FOIA that there were wiretaps. We didn't even know. And guess whose name was on them? Judge Bernardi. Same judge that presided over Susan's trial, same judge that presided over Jamie's trial.
How long was she locked up for?
Susan was in for, she was arrested in 1999, and her trial, she was acquitted in 2000. She had her baby while she was in county awaiting trial.